Today, I'm going to share something that I never imagined would come from my podcasting experience. In fact, when I thought about it as a potential outcome, I even worked against myself for a while. What's happening, podcasters? This is 1000 Podcasters, and I'm Brian Ensminger. I want to see you be successful with your podcast, and this particular episode is part of David Hooper's 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge, as well as National Podcast Post Month. You can find links to both of those in the episode notes. Today, we're talking about surprising outcomes from podcasting, and part of the deal is, I think by its very nature, we don't always know where the end of a path is going to take us when we take the first step. And in my case, I definitely didn't know what was around the bend when I started my podcast. And one of my biggest surprises has actually become one of my greatest joys. When I originally started the Engaging Missions show, I had some ideas on some things that might come out of the show. For example, I hoped that missionaries and church planters would be encouraged, and so would people that were called to be in the marketplace, right? So that was one of the outcomes, and I think that definitely has been delivered. But I also thought, maybe there are some ways that I can serve a little bit more deeply, and maybe in some ways that are valuable enough for me to be paid for what I do. And I thought maybe creating and maintaining websites for missionaries might be helpful, or helping them with their email newsletters, or perhaps helping put together care packages for missionaries, or maybe focusing on particular organizations or churches and creating sponsorships for them to help support the show while I helped spread the word about the people that were connected with them. And frankly, none of that turned out well. None of that actually happened. And there were some things that I always tried to push aside as I thought about ways that I could make my show valuable and also help benefit me and help cover the cost of creating this show. I always wanted to focus on things that were repeatable and were low effort. So I tried to stay away from service type things. I focused more on products or maybe things that were repeatable or scalable. And because of that, whenever I thought about potentially picking up editing as something to do, I tried to push that aside. Now, at the very beginning, it was wise to push that aside because I wasn't very good. I wasn't a very good editor. I had some background in music and in audio production, but I definitely wasn't good at spoken word editing. And also, it was pretty time consuming. In fact, when I thought about ways to improve my show and also recapture some of the time that was going into the production, rather than investing in training or software, the first thing I invested in was a team. I brought in somebody who had experience with audio production. I'd worked with him on some projects in the past, and I brought him in to edit my show. And I brought in Gabby, who helped with my episode notes as well. So I brought in a couple of people to help, and while they were helping give back some time, then I started investing in myself to help make myself a better host. I invested in Podcaster Society, and then later I invested in Chris Curran's podcast engineering school to up-level my ability with my show, because while I was working on my show, I had actually unintentionally picked up some editing. When I had Scott McClelland, who hosts the FX Missions Leadership Moment on my show, he wasn't a podcast host. He was a missionary. He was actually a business person who led short-term missions trips. I had him on my show as a guest, and we kind of hit it off. He had some background in radio, but he had no background in podcasting, but he'd been out of it for a while, and he thought that he really might be interested in getting back into it and asked if I would like to have a segment of my show to be produced by him. And that led to the creation of the Foundational Missions Leadership Minute, which promptly went for more than a minute. I think the shortest we ever had was probably in the 90-second range, which was absolutely fine. But he was really more comfortable in sort of that 5 to 10 minute range. And so eventually we broke that off, and it became its own show. We had that conversation. He contacted me and said, "Hey, I think this would be great for its own show. Would you mind editing my show?" And so I unintentionally started picking up some editing by working with him. And even though I'd been trying to avoid it, that became something that I was doing. And I very quickly realized that I needed to invest to get better at that. So I had been listening to the podcast engineering show. I believed that Chris Curran had what I needed in terms of up-leveling my skills, so I invested in that particular course, and believe me, that did up-level my skills. But then as I was working on Scott's show, he got the idea for another show. And so I picked up editing a second show for him that was a longer form interview show as opposed to what was typically a shorter form solo or sometimes interview show. So I picked that up. And as time went on, I began to realize that I really enjoyed the editing. Yes, it's detailed. Yes, it takes a long time. Yes, sometimes it's even frustrating, but I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it well enough that I wanted to pick up some more of that. And so I've actually found myself editing for more clients. I found myself in it accidentally, but now I'm jumping in with both feet. And that's one of the surprising things that happened because of my podcast. There have been other surprises for sure. One of the more recent surprises has been how much I'm enjoying this particular show, this short form solo show. When I originally started this show back in May of this year, it was an assignment for the One Funnel Away challenge. And I wanted to keep it going because I thought it was valuable. And then when I discovered the 30-day solo host challenge from David Hooper, I was all in for National Podcast Post Month, but with the idea that I definitely wanted to make sure that it was valuable for you. I'm definitely enjoying it, and I'm hoping that you are as well. Here's the question for you, though. What surprised you in your podcasting journey? I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Top Tier Audio, and let me know about something that surprised you about podcasting. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at toptieraudio.com. That's where you can send me an email. You can find links to my social profiles. You can subscribe to the show. You can contact me about editing a show or setting up a consultation. All of that stuff is right there at toptieraudio.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and make a great podcast.